Semoga menjadi yang terbaik dalam penelitian dan pelestarian tumbuhan tropika. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya Diana Kusumastuti, Direktur Jenderal
Ini
Cipta
dikecilkan
Karya,
gimana ya caranya? Saya kan
beserta
baca
keluarga
ini
besar
samping.
Direktorat Jenderal Cipta Karya, Kementerian Pekerjaan Umum dan Perumahan Rakyat mengucapkan selamat ulang tahun yang ke-204 untuk Kebun Raya Bogor yang menjadi pionir kebun raya di Indonesia. Semoga semakin baik pelayanannya dan semakin bermanfaat bagi nusa, bangsa, dan negara. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Mau. Di sini nih, Pak. Aduh. Saya tarik dulu, Pak.
Hello, a very happy 204th birthday, Kebun Raya Bogor. From here in Scotland. I'm Simon Milne, the director of the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh. And our gardens share a long and productive history. And I look forward to us continuing to work together on plant science and conservation to the benefit of our natural world and indeed society. Selamat ulang tahun.
Selamat siang. Greetings from the USA on the 204th anniversary of the Bogor Botanic Gardens. My name is Stephen Maciejewski. I'm Vice President of the American Begonia Society and co-chair of the Conservation Committees for ABS and the Gesneriad Society. I had the pleasure of visiting the Bogor Botanical Gardens while attending the 9th International Flora Malaysianan Symposium in 2013. I met many people and still keep in touch with them, including Vishnu, Ardi, and Dol Rahman. I spent hours in the lovely garden. I will always remember the handkerchief tree, the red jade vine, the pig canary tree, the Copsia arborea, the bamboo groves, and the old cemetery. Looking forward to visiting with you again and working on conservation and educational projects. Sampa Jimpa.
Halo, saya Axel Delbert Poulsen. Saya seorang peneliti jahiliar di Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh. Saya rindu jalan-jalan di Kebun Raya Bogor, menikmati koleksi tumbuhan. Saya juga rindu kerja lapangan dan menulis ilmiah bersama. Mari kita percepat pengetahuan tentang flora Indonesia sebelum hilang. Selamat ulang tahun Kebun Raya Bogor ke-204.
Hello, Kebun Raya Bogor. You're not just a beautiful garden, you're also a garden with a great conservation impact and a great scientific impact. It's been a great pleasure working with you over the past decade, and I look forward to working with you over many years to come. So, selamat ulang tahun.
Good.
Hello to all our friends at Bogor Botanic Gardens from all your friends at the Royal Botanic Gardens queue. Congratulations on your 204th anniversary, and we wish you all the best for your celebratory webinar. You have a beautiful botanic garden, you are highly valued partners, and long may our partnership continue. Happy anniversary.
Happy birthday, Kebun Raya Bogor. More than 20 years ago, I visited you for the first time for my PhD project on orchids. Many students followed, such as Abhishkar Subedi from Nepal, and more recently, your own Richa Kusumawati. I hope we can continue our collaboration for many more years to come.
Saya Rasio Ridosani, Direktur Jenderal Perdagangan Hukum, Lingkungan Hidup dan Kehutanan. Selamat ulang tahun ke-204 kepada Kebun Raya Bogor. Teruslah bekerja, berkarya, dan berkontribusi dalam mengkonservasi dan menyelamatkan kekayaan keanekaragaman hayati bangsa Indonesia. Kebun Raya Bogor, kebanggaan bangsa Indonesia.
Halo, perkenalkan nama saya Abinawanto. Saya selaku Ketua Program Studi Pasca Sarjana Biologi Departemen Biologi FMIPA UI pada kesempatan ini saya mengucapkan selamat ulang tahun kepada Kebun Raya Bogor yang ke-204. Semoga Kebun Raya Bogor menjadi salah satu kebun raya terbaik di Asia, bahkan menjadi kebun raya terbaik di dunia. Dan semoga Kebun Raya Bogor selalu jaya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Kami di FMIPA UM, seluruh sivitas akademika berkomitmen terhadap pelestarian tumbuhan tropika melalui pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian masyarakat. Saya Profesor Dr. Hadiswono MSI, Dekan Fakultas MIPA Universitas Negeri Malang, mengucapkan selamat ulang tahun Kebun Raya Bogor yang ke-204. Semoga menjadi yang terbaik dalam penelitian dan pelestarian tumbuhan tropika. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya Diana Kusumastuti, Direktur Jenderal Cipta Karya, beserta keluarga besar Direktorat Jenderal Cipta Karya, Kementerian Pekerjaan Umum dan Perumahan Rakyat, mengucapkan selamat ulang tahun yang ke-204 untuk Kebun Raya Bogor yang menjadi pionir kebun raya di Indonesia. Semoga semakin baik pelayanannya dan semakin bermanfaat bagi nusa, bangsa, dan negara. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Hello, a very happy 204th birthday, Kebun Raya Bogor, from here in Scotland. I'm Simon Milne, the Director of the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh, and our gardens share a long and productive history, and I look forward to us continuing to work together on plant science and conservation to the benefit of our natural world and indeed society. Selamat ulang tahun.
Selamat siang. Greetings from the USA on the 204th anniversary of the Bogor Botanic Gardens. My name is Stephen Maciejewski. I am Vice President of the American Begonia Society and co-chair of the Conservation Committees for ABS and the Gesneriad Society. I had the pleasure of visiting the Bogor Botanical Gardens while attending the 9th International Flora Malaysianan Symposium in 2013. I met many people and still keep in touch with them, including Vishnu Ardi and Dol Rahman. I spent hours in your lovely garden. I will always remember the handkerchief tree, the red jade vine, the pig canary tree, the Copsia arborea, the bamboo groves, and the old cemetery. Looking forward to visiting with you again and working on conservation and educational projects. Sampa Jumpa.
Halo, saya Axel Delbert Poulsen. Saya seorang peneliti jahe liar di Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh. Saya rindu jalan-jalan di Kebun Raya Bogor, menikmati koleksi tumbuhan. Saya juga rindu kerja lapangan dan menulis ilmiah bersama. Mari kita percepat pengetahuan tentang flora Indonesia sebelum hilang. Selamat ulang tahun Kebun Raya Bogor ke-204.
Hello, Kebun Raya Bogor. You're not just a beautiful garden, you're also a garden with a great conservation impact and a great scientific impact. It's been a great pleasure working with you over the past decade, and I look forward to working with you over many years to come. So, selamat ulang tahun.
Go.
Hello to all our friends at Bogor Botanic Gardens from all your friends.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We are going to start the webinar now. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The Honorable Head of Research Center for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Bapak Dr. R. Hendrian, Master of Science. Honorable speakers, Dr. Barbara Getz, Program Officer Plants for People, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, United Kingdom. Ms. Amy Barker, Species Conservation Assessor, Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, United Kingdom. Dr. Ian Robansa, Coordinator of Threatened Plants Conservation Research Group, Center for Conservation and Botanic Gardens, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Indonesia. Distinguished guests, respectable participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, depends on where you are. On behalf of Research Center for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the webinar in commemorations of the 204th anniversary of Bogor Botanic Gardens and 54th anniversary of the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Wednesday, 19th of May, 2021. My name is Yayan Chandra Kusuma, and I'll be your master of ceremony for today's webinar. This webinar is the second day of the 2 days webinars in commemorations of the 204th anniversary of Bogor Botanic Gardens and 54th anniversary of the theme webinar is Conservation on Threatened Plant Species. I'm very pleased to inform you for today's webinar, we have over 600 participants have been registered from Indonesia and more than 70 participants from 17 countries, including United Kingdom, Singapore, United States of America, the Philippines, Australia, India, Malaysia, Peru, Nigeria, Bolivia, Germany, Palestine, Taiwan, Pakistan, Poland, Republic of Korea, and Timor-Leste. This webinar can also be viewed live through the official YouTube channel of LIPI. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to open today's webinar, I would like to invite the head of Research Center for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, to deliver his opening remarks and to open the webinar.
Saved and further strengthened. Botanic gardens undoubtedly are the last fortress for plant conservation. Botanic gardens and conservation are two sides of the coin, and conservation is the core spirit of the botanic garden, and plant collection are the backbone. Thus, botanic gardens cannot be separate from conservation. Today, Dr. Barbara Hertz, Amy Barker, and Dr. Ian Robiansa will deliver their presentation regarding conservation on threatened plant species, which should be executed by global communities to save plants on the earth. This our planet Earth. Enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Bapak Dr. Arhendian, Master of Science. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar has been officially opened by Head of Research Center for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Bapak Dr. Arhendian, Master of Science. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this is a webinar setup. So only panelists, speakers, moderator, and master of ceremony are seen and able to make audio visual. Before we continue, we will group photo all the panelists. Before, I would like to ask all the panelists to turn on the video for a few minutes to take a group photo. Please, operator. Take the group photo. Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we continue to the main agenda, the presentations given by our prominent speakers and followed by discussions. The presentations will be given by first Dr. Barbara Goetz, Program Officer Plants for People, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, United Kingdom. Second, Ms. Amy Barker, Species Conservation Assessor, Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, United Kingdom. And third, Dr. Ian Robiansyah for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Indonesia. This session will be chaired by Dr. Bayu Aji. So to start for the session, I would like to briefly introduce Dr. Bayu Aji. Dr. Bayu Aji obtained his PhD in Indonesian Institute of Sciences. He is also a plant evolutionary and molecular biologist related groups. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Bayu Aji to chair this session. Dr. Bayu Aji, the platform is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Yaya. Honorable Director Hendrians, respectable presenters, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Bayu, and I will lead these sessions. Today, we will have three excellent speakers who definitely expert and dedicated in assessment and conservation of threatened plant species. Before we start the presentations, let me announce some notes for participants. If you want to ask directly, please use raise hand only in discussion session. You can also use question and answer if you are lucky. If you're lucky, I will read your questions and deliver to the speakers. Otherwise, speakers also will write the answer in the question and answer windows. You can also deliver your question in the YouTube Live, and you can give question both in English or Bahasa Indonesia. Don't expect speaker will answer in Indonesia. Now, let's start the presentations. First presenter is Dr. Barbara Goetz. She is a program officer for Plant and Peoples, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, at the UK. She has very long experience in assessing threatened plants, mainly in a group of cacti, and has also a long career in IUCN's headquarters. And she will deliver presentations, plan on the IUCN red list, how much progress have we done so far and how. Dr. Barbara, you have 20 minutes, and now time is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm gonna share my screen now. And please let me know if you can see it in presentation mode. Is that in the right format now?
Okay, yeah.
Yes,
you can continue.
Okay, perfect. So I will start my presentation now. First of all, happy anniversary, Bogor Botanic Gardens. It is a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to speak this very important event. So good morning, everybody that has joined us this morning in the UK, afternoon in Indonesia. I'm going to give a general overview of what has been going on with the red listing of plants on the IUCN red list for the last couple of decades. So in 2014, the IUCN red list celebrated his 50th anniversary. So the red list has been around for many years, and as you can imagine, it has evolved through time. It was not always as we know it, and it was at around the year 2000 when we started witnessing a new era on the assessment of the extinction risk of species. This was mainly driven by the biodiversity crisis, but also by the availability of information, the means we had to store information and to analyze it. Very importantly also, the IUCN red list categories and criteria were reviewed, and they moved from being a qualitative and subjective system to being a quantitative, strict and consistent methodology. And we move from list of species names and categories to having complete databases, including species maps. In this slide, you can see the 1997 IUCN Red List of Threatened Plants, which was published using the old standards and contained around 30,000 plant species. So it was then, when the IUCN Red List categories and criteria were reviewed, that the IUCN Red List became what as we know it today. And we referred at the IUCN Red List as the world's most comprehensive information source for extinction risk of species. It's a compilation on the conservation status of species at the global level, and it's made with the best scientific information available. And it's widely used to inform and influence biodiversity conservation around the world. It includes very important information that tells us why a species is categorized in the category that it is on the red list. As before, it was only a list with a category, and we would not necessarily understand why a species would be critical, endangered, or vulnerable. And what this information allows us to do is to understand what's happening on the ground and to keep track of this through time. So in the IUCN Red List, you can find information on the threats that the species is facing, their ecological requirements, and also the conservation actions, the ones needed and the ones in place. And the assessments are generated through the knowledge of thousands of world-leading experts, and it's also now considered an online scientific journal. So the first very successful story that we had when this big change happened to the IUCN Red List was the Global Amphibian Assessment. The whole group was assessed for the first time, and the results of this global assessment were published in 2004, which revealed that 30% of amphibians were threatened with extinction, which placed them well, and we realized that they were more threatened than birds and mammals. With the new standards of mapping, it was also the first time that we could map the general diversity patterns, and also, which is the map below the picture of the amphibian. And the bottom map is the mapping of the threats, the geographic distribution of the threats affecting the species. And I'm going to touch more on this further on with a plant example. After the amphibians, the birds were reassessed using the new standards. They assessed the almost 10,000 species in 2004, and this was following 2008, but by the reassessment of the mammals, and they assessed 100% of species. And almost 10 years had passed since the categories and criteria were reviewed, and we didn't hear anything about plants. So this begged the question, what is going on with plants and their extinction risk? And at the time when all these global assessments for vertebrates were being published, only 4% of plants were included on the red list. And it was then when IUCN and several partners started thinking how to tackle this gap in taxonomy and the fact that there were not many plants included on the red list. So looking at it and another way, part of the problem is that when we are talking about plants, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of species. So in 2004, around 300,000 plant species were recognized or described. And even though 4% looks like a very small percentage, it was over 10,000 plants that were already assessed, which represented around 30% of the species included in the red list and more than half of the threatened species on the red list. So in order to represent plants better on the IUCN red list, IUCN and Q came up with the IUCN Sample Red List Index for plants. So the idea was to make a selection of plants across different plant groups to have a better idea of what was really going on with the conservation status of plants around the world. This study was led by Q, and it was published in the year 2012. And it revealed that 1 in 5 plants were threatened with extinction. They assessed around 4,000 plants. And since this has been updated, but Amy is gonna talk about this in the next presentation. After this, another approach that that was taken was to assess complete plant groups. So the first groups to be comprehensively assessed were the conifers and the cycads. And until today, the cycads is the most highly threatened group, taxonomic group across all taxonomic groups that have been assessed for the red list is the most threatened, with 64% of plants threatened with extinction. These assessments were published in the year 2010. And then in the year 2015, the global cactus assessment was completed. We completed 99%, we assessed 99% of species. And this was the first species plant assessment comprehensively assessed. Almost 1,500 species were assessed for the first time. And it was the first time that they were mapped as well, so we could look at the diversity patterns of this plant family that it's mainly endemic to the Americas. So we could map species richness and also the hotspots of threatened species. Through the results of these assessments, we realized that cacti were more threatened than birds and mammals. And it was the first time that a plant group was, the distribution of hotspots of a plant group were compared with the three main vertebrate groups that are very often utilized to guide conservation actions. And we realized that these overlap very little, indicating that sometimes only using vertebrates is not the best approach to set conservation priorities, and that definitely other groups such as plants should be included. And we were also able to map the different threats for cacti. First of all, we realized that they were threatened by a very high diversity of factors. And what the importance of these maps is that it tells us which species are threatened by what and where. So this is a very powerful tool for conservation planning. And obviously this is a part of what was included when the new standards came in place for the IUCN Red List. It really enables to plan on conservation action. The results of this study were published in a high impact paper, and obviously it was a major collaboration between many experts around the world, and it is important from the academic part of things. But what it's more important is that it really catches the attention of the media. So the results of this analysis of the Global Cactus Assessment made it to the media worldwide, and it raised a lot of attention about the fact that plants are facing extinction as well, because extinction is not very often associated to plants. And also the fact that illegal trade was the main threat affecting the species. So again, linking illegal trade with plants, which is not common. So it raised a lot of awareness about plants being threatened and illegal trade. After tackling a few complete groups, the Plants for People initiative was started in IUCN. This was another means of catalyzing the assessment of plants on the red list. And the aim of this initiative was to focus on priority plant groups important for human livelihoods. The specific objectives were to assess 1,500 of the P4P plant groups, which were crop wall relatives, palms, medicinal plants, and timber. Also to develop tools for plant assessments and to boost training on the application of the red list categories and criteria among botanists. I am not going to go into detail on the first point on the assessments. I'm going to just dive in directly on the tools. So one of the most important tools that were developed through the Plants for People initiative was the display of point data for red list assessments. So this completely changed the game for plants, because most of our data, as you well know, comes in point data from herbarium data, herbarium specimens. And the way we map the distribution of species is very different than the way they do it for animals, which are usually polygons. So this really facilitated the inclusion of plants in the red list, because the maps are, if an assessment does not have a map, it is not complete and therefore it cannot be published. The other very important tool that has been key in increasing the number of plants on the red list has been SIS Connect, which basically links external databases that contains large amounts of data on plants to the IUCN SIS database. And it links both databases, allowing the migration of information, accelerating the process of bringing in information into our database. The third element that I mentioned was training botanists, and this is just an example of how that really impacted the red listing of plants. So here we have George Hatz from Missouri Botanical Gardens and Malin Rivers, which is based in BGCI and leads on the Global Tree Assessment. They were trained as red list trainers. Then they went on and trained botanists as red list assessors. So you can see, for example, George Hatz trained botanists in New Caledonia, Madagascar, and Hawaii, while Malin Rivers trained staff in BGCI. They started with 3, I think they have now 7 members of staff. And then these botanists went on and used the learned skills on red list assessments and started doing assessments in different ways through review workshops, assessment workshops, or like BGCI just producing assessments, working constantly on assessments. In the first line, in the third line, you can see the total number of assessments that started slowly trickling into the IUCN red list in the year 2015. And by today, you can see at the bottom of the slide, the number of assessments that have been produced after the training, and obviously in conjunction with the display of points, and also the SIS Connect in many cases. So Madagascar, for example, has submitted over 4,000 assessments, while the Global Tree Assessment has produced over 30,000 plant assessments.
You have 5 minutes left.
Perfect. Perfect. So the other big thing that happened was the global tree assessment, which was it has been a game changer for bringing plant assessments into the red list. It started in early 2017, and they've been using a lot of the tools that have been developed previously. Another big partnership that has allowed the red listing of plants was the IUC and Toyota Red List Partnership that has allowed us to assess some complete plant groups in different parts of the world, like the Proteaceae family, Agaves and Yuccas in the Americas, Aloes in Africa, and many crop wild relatives across the world and in different regions. So this graph basically shows how the number of assessments have changed through the years in the IUCN Red List. And you can see basically that from the year 2013, it started growing exponentially. And today we have over 50,000 assessments of plants on the Red List, of which over 20,000 of the species are threatened with extinction. So going back at that graph that I showed you at the beginning of my presentation, this is how plants on the red list look today. So we have around over 400,000 accepted described species. We've assessed now over 30% of species. They conform 40% of the species on the red list and represent over half of the threatened species. So in terms of the representation of plants, I hope you have heard about the Barometer of Life, which was a big initiative that started in 2010 to make the red list a broader taxonomic for the red list to have a broader representation. And the target that was set was of 160,000 species to be included on the red list. Of these, specifically for plants, we had a target of 38,000 species, and now we have gone over that. We have over 54,000. So obviously the red list, this has been a major collaboration between the red list partners, specifically BGCI, Kew, NatureServe, Missouri Botanical Gardens, Albuquerque Biopark, and also many of the plant specialist groups in the IUCN SSE, and independent other institutions that might not be part of IUCN but have collaborated with us, such as Bogor Garden and their group of botanists who have been collaborating with the Global Tree Assessment. And the red listing is the first step in conservation. We are now confident to say that we have a much better representation of plants on the IUCN red list. And the next steps that would have to follow would be the identification of key biodiversity areas and areas for the Alliance of Zero Extinction. We have to start thinking about the reassessments of certain groups to start to be able to calculate the red list index, do more conservation planning to direct conservation on the ground actions as well. So thanks for listening, and I look forward for your questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
Oh, great, Barbara, exactly 20 minutes. Okay. Very interesting presentations. I think you mentioned that many regions and also a group of plants is understudied. So it is something like so many things to do. It just notes that the most sophisticated complex group that studied is conifers, cycads, also cacti. And then I mentioned also that 1 in 5 are threatened for almost in 4,000 species studied. It's very wow.
Yes, and that has been updated since. So this was a lot of the data that I presented is historical. But Amy will be talking more about,
Plant and People project for the people in the IUCN is how plants on the red list used for livelihood and how it's conserved. Things is also important thing that usually the threatened species is very less populations and how it used. Okay, that's very nice. And then now come to the next presenter is Ms. Amy Barker. She is a species conservation assessor at the Kew Botanic Garden, United Kingdom. She is graduated in biology from Imperial College London. Most of her works dealing with conservation assessment and analysis, including extension risk analysis using herbarium and specimen. Herbarium specimen on also as well literature as well. She will deliver presentations about assessing the extinction risk of plants, a focus on Indonesian trees. Amy, you also have 20 minutes, and then now time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen for you all. Okay. Hopefully that's sharing for you all okay. Yeah, I'm going to assume that's a yes. So good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction and for inviting me to speak today. It's a really great privilege to be here, and also happy anniversary to Bogor Botanic Garden. So I'm going to talk to you today about my work as a species conservation assessor at Kew, assessing plants for the IUCN Red List, and the work I've been doing over the past year on assessing trees native to Indonesia. So we've already had an introduction to what the Red List is from Barbara, so hopefully you'll all be familiar with it. I'd just like to give an overview of how scientists at Kew and our collaborators worldwide are contributing to the IUCN Red List. The Kew is an official partner organisation to the Red List. We join many other organisations to advance the development, maintenance, promotion and use of the IUCN Red List of threatened species. From 2016 to earlier this year, Kew had a dedicated plant assessment unit established as part of a 5-year collaboration between Toyota and IUCN, and this was aimed to accelerate the assessment of species in tropical regions. Since 2016, a network of Kew scientists and global collaborators have produced over 5,000 new global assessments for the Red List. And our position as a multidisciplinary organisation provides us with the unique taxonomic expertise and data, all of which form the basis for our conservation assessments. So red listing projects at Kew are really diverse, and they span both continents and a huge diversity of plant families. And some of our major red listing projects carried out at Kew have included an assessment of over 250 species of orchid native to New Guinea, a global assessment of coffee, a global assessment of Musaceae or the banana family, assessments of the medicinal and aromatic plants of Pakistan, and also an assessment of over 800 species of Myrcia, which is native to South America and one of the largest genera of tropical plants. We've also worked on assessments of plants endemic to Cameroon, including plants endemic to Ibo Forest, which is one of the largest intact rainforests remaining in Cameroon and home to a huge diversity of plants and animals. And efforts by Kew scientists, along with in-country partners and NGOs, resulted in the halting of a logging concession set to destroy the forest. And this is a true success story that highlights the real-world impact the Red List assessments can make. So, and this has been touched on already by Barbara, but currently over 54,000 plants are currently assessed on the Red List, and this comprises around 14% of all known plant species. And this value has increased in recent years thanks to concerted large-scale efforts, which are increasing the documentation of plants. And so an example of this is the Global Tree Assessment led by BGCI and their partners, and which Kew contributes. However, there's still a lot of work to do to achieve our collective aim of assessing all known species of plants. So on the red list, there are 9 categories in which a species may be assessed as, and these are extinct, extinct in the wild, there's critically endangered, endangered and vulnerable, and these are the species which are threatened with extinction. There's near threatened, and these are species which are close to the threatened thresholds or that would be threatened without ongoing conservation measures. There's also least concerned species, and these are species evaluated with a lower risk of extinction, but importantly, these aren't species that we don't need to care about. They're likely to still be experiencing threats too and will require monitoring. And finally, a species can be assessed as data deficient, and this is where no assessment can be made using the criteria, and this is generally due to having insufficient data. And as you can see from the chart here, around 40% of all plants assessed so far fall into a threatened category. So why is the red list so important? Well, as recently reported in Kew's latest State of the World's Plant and Fungi, 2 in 5 plants are estimated to be threatened with extinction, which, as Barbara mentioned earlier, is higher than the previously estimated 1 in 5 plants. However, plants are currently greatly underrepresented on the red list, despite being the keystones of our ecosystems and of all life on Earth. So researching and documenting extinction risk using red list assessments helps us to know what the current status of species is, and also to identify which species and which parts of the world are of priority for conservation. We know that human activities are what are driving species extinctions, whether that's through land use change or through our impact on the global climate. So if we are to halt this biodiversity loss, we need to understand which species are under the greatest level of threat and also where they are. So the vast majority of global extinctions are thought to be undocumented, as many species are yet to be discovered and described. So this 2019 study into seed-bearing plants found that on average, 2.3 species have become extinct each year for the past 250 years. And this rate is up to 500 times the background rate of extinctions and is particularly high in the tropics, so places like Madagascar, the Brazilian Amazon, India and South Africa. Further, the rate of extinction is actually thought to be accelerating. And if you look at Indonesia, you can see that there have been several recorded extinctions since 1900, with most of these being on Sumatra. So islands are particularly sensitive to change and are more likely to contain endemic species, and this makes them more prone to species extinctions. The study found that almost 600 plant species have become extinct. An example of these are the Kalimantan mango and the St. Helena olive, and just 2 examples of many species that are now considered to be extinct or extinct in the wild. And this value of 600 plant extinctions is also thought very likely to be an underestimate. There's still a lot of research to be done till we know what the true value is. And all of this really highlights the imminent need for researching and documenting extinction risk to identify which species need conservation action and also which parts of the world are of priority for conservation. So now I'm going to talk about the project that I've been working on, and that's been on assessing 150 trees native to Indonesia, and that's what I've been doing for the past year. So my work falls within the Arcadia funded Threatened Biodiversity Hotspots programme at Kew, which is led by Dr. Kate Hardwick and managed by Ian Wiley, and I'm sure many of you will have worked with them at some point. So this programme builds on the Millennium Seed Bank Partnership, which is designed to support and develop partner seed banks to safeguard rare and threatened species, particularly those which are endemic. And the aim of the programme is to work closely with in-country partner organisations to ensure that each of 5 regions has a highly focused seed conservation facility and is working to international standards, able to support a variety of plant conservation and research initiatives nationally. And my role within this broad scale project was the research and completion of 150 assessments of trees native to Indonesia as part of an initial phase focusing on plant conservation in the Sunderland Biodiversity Hotspot. And this part of the project was funded by the Garfield Weston Foundation. So why is it important to focus on assessments of Indonesian flora? So as I'm sure most of you will know, Indonesia is one of the mega diverse countries of the world. It has over 28,000 species of flowering plants native to the archipelago and an exceptionally high level of species endemism. It spans two biodiversity hotspots, Sunderland and Wallacea, which are highlighted on the map above. And biodiversity hotspots are regions which have irreplaceable biodiversity. So these are measured as having at least 1,500 endemic vascular plants, and they also must have 30% or less of their original vegetation remaining. And therefore, these are areas which are not only highly biodiverse, but also highly threatened. So clearly, Indonesia is of critical conservation importance, and there are many challenges to continuing to conserve biodiversity amidst the rapidly growing demand for land and resources. In general, despite its immense biodiversity, plants from tropical Asia are currently greatly underrepresented in IUCN Red List assessments. There are currently only 3,690 assessments of Indonesian plants on the Red List, and this would only account for around 13% of Indonesia's total flora. So whereabouts were the species that I assessed for part of the project? So the majority of species assessed were focused within the Sunderland hotspot, with most occurring on Sumatra, 75 of which were endemic to the island or its outlying islands. A high number of species assessed also occurred on Java and Borneo, and then a small number of species assessed occurred on Sulawesi, Lesser Sunda Islands, Moluccas, and also Indonesian New Guinea. So this chart shows a summary of the final categories for the 150 species assessed. And as you can see, a high proportion of species were assessed within a threatened category, and 41% were classified as least concern. So less than half of all species were assessed as least concern. And critically endangered and endangered make up the highest proportion of the threatened assessments. And 19% of species were assessed as data deficient. And just to look a bit more closely at these results, so the largest group of the trees assessed were the Sumatran endemics, and there were 75 of these species. And the number of threatened species within this group were found to be particularly high. So with 56% assessed within a threatened category, compared to only 17% of assessments being least concern, and 21% of the assessments were data deficient. And this chart gives an overview of the threats identified for all of the assessed species. So as you can see, agriculture, which is on both a commercial and a small scale, is the dominant threat, which is impacting the highest number of species. Logging was also identified as another major threat, which is unsurprising as the logging of forests generally precedes clearance for agricultural purposes. The expansion of towns and cities was also identified as a major threat for many species. And other factors identified as major threats include geological events. So this was mostly volcanoes, as several species on Sumatra were found to be endemic to active volcanoes. And also an increase in fire frequency and intensity, and also mining and quarrying. So if we focus on Sumatra and the deforestation that's taking place there, much of the clearance has taken place within recent decades, and it's largely been driven by commercial activities, so particularly expansion of commercial plantations. So in 1950, primary forest still covered 71% of Sumatra, but by 2010, this had reduced to only 30%. And this map from Global Forest Watch shows the extent of forest conversion on Sumatra, and the coloured shapes represent concessions for different types of tree and crop plantations. And this wild scale change in land use was found to be a major factor in the high number of Sumatran species assessed as threatened. And this was particularly the case for lowland species, as the montane species were found in the Bukit Barisan range, which runs along the western length of the island, and these species were less likely to be threatened. So, as well as identifying the threats to species, another important aspect when conducting the assessments was to find out whether the species are known to have any particular use to humans, whether that be at a small scale on a local level or at a wider national scale. So only 20% of species assessed were found to be utilised by humans in some way, and the most common uses were as food, for construction purposes, in traditional medicine, or as ornamental plants or street trees. And other uses noted for a very small number of species were for things such as animal feed, as fibre for textiles or ropes, as fuels, or used to make small household goods and handicrafts. However, the majority of species were not found to have any use recorded. But this doesn't necessarily mean that all of these species aren't potentially useful in some way. It's really important to remember that many of the species assessed were only known from a handful of records, and therefore they're really poorly researched, and we may not even know their full distribution yet. There's always the possibility that further research into these species could reveal them to be potentially valuable resources. With so many of the species assessed threatened with extinction, we are at risk of losing potentially invaluable resources before we get the chance to properly document and understand them. And of course, this is all coming from a very anthropocentric viewpoint, as all species play important functional roles in their ecosystems. So even if they don't have a tangible benefit to people, they're still really important in maintaining ecosystem functions such as water, air, or soil quality. All of these things are vital to all living things on Earth. So I'm now going to give some examples of species that have been assessed. And I will start here by following on from the previous slide with an example of a species that is useful to people. So this species here is Apsalia javanica, which is a member of the Fabaceae family. And this species is a very large, slow-growing tree endemic to the lowland rainforest of Sumatra and Java. It grows up to 42 meters tall and is valued as a hardwood timber species. It's planted at a local scale on Java for timber harvesting, but it's also harvested from the wild. And it's greatly valued for its use in constructing quality furniture, flooring, and other things such as doors and window frames. So this species was assessed as least concern due to its large range size and the relatively large number of collections, which indicate it is unlikely to be a rare species. However, the rate and sustainability of timber harvesting is currently unknown. It's a very slow-growing tree, meaning that recoveries following any population reductions due to timber harvesting will be slow. However, simply due to the lack of information regarding the generation length and the population size of the species, the only information available to assess it was its range size. So this is an example of a species assessed as least concern, but where research into its population size and the impact of harvesting is urgently needed in order to better understand its conservation status. So whilst that was a species we knew a lot about, most of the species we didn't know very much about at all. So an example of this is Trigonostemon dipteranthus, a member of the Forbiaceae. It's a very poorly known small tree endemic to West Sumatra and is known only from the type specimen, which was recorded at an unknown locality within the Padang region. It has not been recorded in over 100 years, despite being a distinctive species within the genus, and this indicates it's really likely to be rare or have a small population size. There's been some loss of primary forests within West Sumatra due to commercial logging and plantations. However, compared to other regions of Sumatra, much of the region is still intact and it's protected by Perintis Seblant National Park. So this species was assessed as data deficient due to the lack of information on its distribution and habitat, making it impossible to infer its likely current status. And this is an example of one of many species where there simply is not enough information to make an informed decision about its current status, and again, where surveys and more research are urgently required. So some species are highly restricted and clearly threatened. So for example, Gomphandra dolicarpa was recorded only from the vicinity of a place called Huta Bagasan in the Asahan Regency in North Sumatra. And based on what we know, the collections here represent the only population of this species. However, satellite imagery and land use data show that there has been extensive forest conversion at Huta Bagasan, as well as further oil palm and rubber plantations in the surrounding lowland areas, which can be seen on the map here. So from this, it was inferred that the vast majority of the species habitat has been lost, and it's highly unlikely that other subpopulations exist. So this species was assessed as critically endangered based on its very small area of occupancy and extent of occurrence. And also a modelling framework found that there was a high probability that the species could actually now be extinct. So the tag of possibly extinct has been applied to this species, and targeted surveys in the area urgently needed to determine if it is still extant anywhere in the region, and if so, to also determine its population size, as it is likely that very few individuals still remain. So something I noted while carrying out these assessments was the high importance of protected areas to the many of the species assessed. For example, on Java, there were a high number of assessments of species occurring on the island, which were recorded from, and I'm sorry for the pronunciation, but Gunung Gede Pangrango or Gunung Halaman Salak National Parks. And this really highlights how essential these protected areas are to many species. And these areas could well represent some of the only areas of remaining habitat able to support viable subpopulations for many species. And if we look back to Sumatra, the three national parks, Gunung Lusa National Park, Kerinci Sebelat National Park, and Bukit Barisan Selatan National Park, these protected areas cover an area of over 2.5 million hectares and constitute one of the biggest conservation areas in Southeast Asia. There were numerous species that I assessed in these parks, which shows that they are vital to the conservation of these species, particularly those endemic to the island. However, despite the protected status of these areas, they are still experiencing threats, and particularly around the park borders. And these come from things like road construction, illegal logging, and encroachment from agriculture and plantations. Also, the irregular shapes of the parks and their long boundaries can make enforcement difficult and can make areas, especially around the edges, vulnerable to encroachment. So, for example, this species here, which is Ficus rubicis, a tree endemic to a single mountain within Kerinci Sebelat National Park, was actually assessed as vulnerable despite occurring within the protected area. And this was due to evidence of encroachment around the mountain, placing it under potential future threat from habitat loss if interventions aren't taken. So overall, despite my project representing only a very small sample of Indonesia's such diverse flora, the results show that a high proportion of threatened tree species native to the country. The proportion of species found to be threatened was much higher than the 23% of threatened assessments currently available on the red list. So clearly there is a real need to get more of Indonesia's flora assessed on the red list, given that there may be a high likelihood that many species could be threatened. And so knowing which species these are and also where they are will be vital to helping set priorities for future
1 minute
work. 1 minute. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. But there are some real challenges faced when carrying out extinction risk assessments for plants. And one of the major challenges is that we rarely have any data on plant population sizes. If we're lucky, we may have indications on herbarium level labels that a species is rare or common, but the lack of this information means we're generally restricted to assessing species based only on their geographic range size. So further surveys and research were recommended for all species assessed as part of this project, as understanding the population sizes will give a clearer understanding of their true conservation status. Also, a generation length is required for all assessments using criterion A on the red list. And this is another really common gap in plant knowledge, and is something that is rarely available and requires a deep understanding of the species or group it belongs to. Also, population data from future surveys needs to be combined with research into species life history and its generation length in order to make future assessments more comprehensive. And finally, the majority of collections across all species assessed were not made recently. So many collections were made in the 19th to early 20th century, and knowing the conditions of habitats and collection localities at these points in time is really challenging. So we often just have to make a guess as to whether a species is still likely to occur at that locality today. And this lack of recent collections for species assessed within the project further highlights the need for more surveys and research into the current status of trees in Indonesia. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that interesting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Very interesting that also that she mentioned that Indonesia also mega biodiversity countries in the world, as we know, and also this is the most true biodiversity hotspot in Sundaland and Wallace. And when we consider the map of the distribution of study in assessment of threatened plants, the western part of Indonesia, there is maybe a lot of something well studied, but the eastern part of Indonesia is very understudied. Of course, as Indonesians has experienced many challenges when we study in the eastern part of Indonesia, transportation, facility, and also bigger funding. And then also there is so many reasons in past expansion of settlements, agriculture, plantation, and so on, that probably we will running out of time. Very much challenging in study when we have also limited only study in voucher. Okay, I think for Barbara, you've seen so now many questions. It's come to you, and you can read the question and answer and prepare for the answer. Okay, and then our last presenter. Come to the last presenter is sorry. Oh, my colleagues, Dr. Ian Robiansa. Dr. Ian is awarded PhD from the Department of Biology, King Abdul Aziz University. Now she works as a research staff at a research center for plant conservation and botanic garden as coordinator of conservation of Indonesian threatened plants research group. And his work, also his publications is almost all in how to assess the threatened species, population study. Also, he is a member of IUCN SSC Global Tree Specialist Group. And he will deliver presentations about Bogor Botanic Gardens and conservation of Indonesian threatened plant species. And as well as the others, you will have 20 minutes to present your PowerPoint. And then now time is yours, Dr. Ian.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Bayu. Thank you very much. Let me now share my screen first. Is it clear, Pak Bayu?
Yeah, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, yang terhormat Bapak Ibu, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for still being here, attending the last presentation of today's webinar. The title of my presentation is Bogor Botanic Gardens and Conservation of Indonesian Threatened Plant Species. My talk will cover the following topics. The first one is about the current status of Indonesian plant species, including its diversity and threats. And then we will talk about the threatened plant species of Indonesia, and then exit collection of these threatened plant species in Bogor Botanic Gardens. And then we will talk a little bit more about the conservation program at Bogor Botanic Garden, including the activities of assessment, planning, and action. And then the last one, we will talk about the future direction of conservation program at the Bogor Botanic Garden. Okay, let's move now to the first topic of my talk, which is about the current status of Indonesian plant species. According to the books of Status Keanekaragaman Hayati Indonesia, Kekayaan Jenis Tumbuhan dan Jamur Indonesia, published by LIPI in 2019, Indonesia has 1,611 species of pteridophytes, and also Indonesia has around 24,632 species of spermatophyte. Under the spermatophytes group, Indonesia has 24,497 species of angiosperm, and as you can see, Java has the highest number of angiosperm species, while the Lesser Sunda Island has the lowest number of the species. And then for gymnosperm species, there are around 135 species of the gymnosperm in Indonesia, with Sumatra being the highest number of, being the highest island with the highest number of this species of gymnosperm. And then Lesser Sunda Island is the has the lowest number of the species of gymnosperm. However, this low number of species of gymnosperm and angiosperm in Lesser Sunda Island and other islands in eastern parts of Indonesia is likely due to the low intensity of floral exploration in this area compared to the floral expedition in the western parts of Indonesia. Therefore, the opportunity or the chance to find new, to discover new species in this area is still high. In the global level, new discovery in the plant kingdom has been published at the rates of more than 5,000 species per year for the last 10 years. Here you can see the trend of the new discovery in the plant kingdom. The data was extracted from International Plant Name Index. Last year, there are at least 39 new species discovered in Indonesia, mostly from Sulawesi with 10 species, followed by Sumatra, 7 species, and then Papua, 5 species. Kalimantan, 6 species, and then Papua, 5 species, and then from Maluku with 3 species. These new species mostly come from Bigoniaceae and Orchidaceae. So where will the next new plants be found? According to the data of species density in each island of Indonesia, here you can see that Sumatra and then Borneo and New Guinea has low species density compared to the island of Java, Maluku, and Lesser Sunda Island. So the opportunity to discover new species in this island, in Sumatra and Borneo and New Guinea, is still high. The diversity of Indonesian plant species face many threats, including habitat conversion and degradation, also biological resource use, and then from invasive species, also geological event, and the last one is from the climate change. The major threats faced by the diversity of Indonesian plant is from habitat conversion and degradation, as you can see on the graph. Within these threats, habitat conversion into agriculture and aquaculture is the highest threats for the plant conservation in Indonesia. Okay, now we move on to the next topic of my talks, which is about the threatened plant species of Indonesia. Until now, there are 3,690 species that have been assessed its conservation status in IUCN Red List. Of this number, there are 831 species that are threatened with extinction, or they have the category of critically endangered, and vulnerable. If we look into the distribution of threatened species in each island in Indonesia, here you can see that Kalimantan has the highest number of threatened species, followed by Sumatra and then Papua. However, if we look into the most threatened category, which is the critically endangered, Sumatra has the highest number of threatened species with 72 species here. And this is the composition of the threatened species in Indonesia, the Berkepribadian has the highest number of threatened species with 178 species, followed by Lauraceae and then Zingiberacea. So of these 831 threatened species found in Indonesia, only 35 species that are included in the formal protection under the national law. Nepenthes has the highest number of the protected species with 20 species, followed by Orchidaceae with 10 species. Okay, that's all regarding the information of the threatened plant in Indonesia. Now we talk about the ex situ collection of this threatened plant at Bogor Botanic Gardens. Until now, Bogor Botanic Garden holds more than 11,000 specimens of plants, Indonesian plants. This collection comes from more than 3,200 species, 1,100 genus, and then 200 family. Of this collected species, there are 188 threatened species collection. However, if you look into the only native species, there are only 105 threatened collection here in Bogor Botanic Garden. Here is the composition of 105 threatened collection of plant collection at Bogor Botanic Garden. Here you can see that the Berkepribadian has the highest collection here in Bogor Botanic Garden. Please note that this list is excluding orchid, Nepenthes, Hoya, begonia, and other glasshouse collection. Okay, now we move on to the next topic about the conservation program at Bogor Botanic Garden. I categorize this program into the 3 categories: assess, plan, and act. Under the assessment program, the main activity is to collect population data on threatened endemic plant species and also to conduct conservation status assessment based on IUCN Red List category and criteria. Just to give you an example, we would like to share the result of our population survey of Actinodapnea quercina, one of the species from Lauraceae family. This species is a narrow-endemic species, known only from one collection from Lebak Regency in Banten Province. The tree is last collected in 1841, and then it is assessed as critically endangered. Major threat for this species is deforestation and habitat destruction. In addition, the species has no ex situ collection until now. So to enhance the conservation of this species, we conduct a population survey in 5 locations in around Sawarna area in Lebak Regency, Banten Province. And the result, we successfully found this species in only in one location with only 8 individuals. So based on this finding, we propose a new conservation status for the species. The species is still critically endangered, but we have add additional criteria, we add to the category of the species. Another activity under the assessment program is the project of conservation assessment of Indonesian tree species toward the global tree assessment. This project is the part of a global tree assessment project coordinated by Botanic Garden Conservation International, BGCI. The main activity is to collect occurrence data based on herbarium specimen at Herbarium Bogoriense in Cibinong. We also conduct online training on how to assess plant species using IUCN Red List category and criteria. And the result, until the end of December 2020, 575 species have been assessed, of which 13% are under critically endangered category, 31% is under the endangered category, and 24% is under vulnerable category. So another activities under this assessment program is the production of National Red List book. In the beginning of this year, we published this National Red List book containing 50 species of commercial timber trees. This book is produced through a cooperative work between LIPI and then also the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Fauna and Flora International Indonesia Program, and Forum Pohon Langka Indonesia. Okay, now we move on to the next activity here in Bogor Botanic Gardens regarding developing a conservation strategy for threatened plant species. The first strategic plan we produce here in Bogor Botanic Garden is on the strategy and conservation action for Rafflesia conservation 2015-2025. This strategic plan is produced by LIPI and also the Ministry of Environment and Forestry with the support from local government and house representative of Bengkulu Province. The second strategic plan we have for Indonesian plant species is strategy and conservation action plan for Amor Alus. Similar with the Rafflesia, this strategic plan is produced by LIPI and KLHK, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, with the support of local government and house representative of Bengkulu Province. The last one we have regarding the strategic plan for the Indonesian plant species is conservation strategy for 12 national priority tree species to 2019-2029. Under this strategic plan, we have 12 species that are divided into 3 different priorities. The first priorities contain 4 species, which are mostly endemic species. And then under the second priorities, we have 2 species, and in the third priority, we have a species. Okay, and then we move on to the last activities in the Bogor Botanic Garden Conservation Program, which is to increase the number of ex situ collection of threatened plants and also to propagate this collection in order to support the species recovery program and also the ecosystem restoration program. We will give you some example of the recently collected collection here in Bogor Botanic Garden. The first one is Vatica cauliflora. This is a critically endangered species endemic to Kapuas Hulu Regency in West Kalimantan Province. We managed to collect seedling of this species and then cultivate it here in Bogor Botanic Garden. The second species, as an example, is Lithocarpus castermansii. This is an endemic species in Java Island. The status of this species is endangered. We managed to collect the seed of this species and then germinate the seed here in Bogor Botanic Garden. As you can see the last example of the species is Casin cordesii. Actually, we already have the collection here in Bogor Botanic Garden. However, during our last survey in 2020, last year, we conducted a survey for this species in Jember Regency. However, we couldn't locate the species. Therefore, we aim to propagate the collection through cutting method and also tissue culture method. Okay, now we come to the last section of my presentation about the future direction of the conservation program here in Bogor Botanic Garden. The first one, I propose to continue the assessment and reassessment of conservation status of Indonesian plant species. As I mentioned before, there are only 3,690 species that have been assessed. This is more or less 30%, as Amy Barker mentioned before. And from this number, a total of 880 species need updating. The second activities that I propose to conduct in the near future is to develop conservation strategy for threatened plant species. I also mentioned before that there are only 14 taxa that already have conservation strategies and action plan. For the new strategic plan, we should focus on the most threatened species, such as endemic, critically endangered, or evolutionary distinct species. The last one, we have to produce this strategic plan by involving all relevant stakeholders in order to make this strategic plan comprehensive. And then the next one is to increase ex situ collection and support species recovery and ecosystem restoration. Under these activities, the following action could be conducted. The first one is to do the population survey, also and plant collection, to add the ex situ collection of the threatened species of Indonesian diversity. The next one is to develop effective propagation of threatened plant species, and then to start the program of species recovery programs using the result of the propagation conducted before. And the last one is to use native and threatened plant species in the ecosystem restoration programs. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Pak Bayu, terima kasih banyak.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ian. It's very interesting to present state of the art of the status of Indonesian study in threatened plants, and also how the role of Bogor Botanic Gardens to study and to conserve the plants. And as you've seen here, there is some people already raise hand, and also many questions in the question and answer windows. And for the first chance, I will give to some people already raise hands. Oh, I see. I seen the director Hendrian raise hand to give some comments or questions to the presenter. Time is yours, Director.
Terima kasih, Pak Bayu. I noticed in one of slides presented by Dr. Barbara, it's about the role of media in increasing public awareness. I do agree, and I think it's great for scientists to deal not only with scientific journals, but also do the mainstreaming and send info in the popular media. But the problem is, on the other hand, exposing rare and threatened plants in media often leads to overharvesting and illegal trading. So what do you think, Dr. Barbara?
Thank you very much for the question. It is a weapon of two sharp sides, yes. Right? As we say. In the experience that we have had with cacti is a lot of people are now aware that illegal trade of cacti is an issue for plants in the wild, and more in shops coming to us asking us, how can I make sure that I am not buying an illegally sourced plant? Right? And I think, on the other hand, when we're talking about people that have specialized collections, which is mainly the people driving this illegal trade, the important thing not to to publish is the exact locations of the species.
Yes.
So I think the benefits of raising awareness about the extinction risk of the species is larger than the opposite, as long as, again, the precise information on the locations of the species are not published. For plants such as cycads and cacti and some of the South African succulents that are highly threatened, we don't publish the maps on the IUCN Red List, and we only make them available to very few people and with only with the objectives for conservation.
Because mainstreaming the conservation issues is also important, I think. Public must know about it. Yes, yes. And a lot of conservation actions can come from that. You know, there's more interest from people to understand about this problem. Yes, it also triggering. Yes.
Yes, I the tax. Pardon?
No, I said thank you to the moderator, because I think you have complete your explanation. Sorry.
Perfect.
Okay, then another one to raise hand. I think it's Lily Ismaini. Maybe you, moderator can unmute and give a chance to speak to Lily Ismaini. Hello? Oh, okay. Maybe she just noticed that raise hand will give a chance to give a question directly. Okay, second question. From forums, and is come to Barbara, and also Dr. Ian also willing to answer these questions. The question is, very often people seek the most rare or endangered species because they can sell in higher price. For example, recently, Monstera become booming in the market, and people seeking very, very hard, and then price become so high, and then population become threatened. So how you overcome to the impact of the publishing, also the status of the plants? Barbara, please.
Yes, I think this links with the previous question. It's illegal trade is not an easy thing to tackle, and as I mentioned before, one way to protect populations is not to publish the exact localities, even though in many occasions the collectors that trade them illegally know the locations better than botanists. In that way, you know, you can always call for responsibly sourcing of plants, better implementation of national laws and international laws to protect the species. And also, I think it's important to try and understand what's driving the desire for these plants. So it's not an easy question to answer, but.
Thank you, Barbara. I think I have also bad experience when publishing new species of tree ferns Dixonia in Bali Botanic Garden, when I plant a collection of only we have 2 specimens, and I put some information that this is a new species and this is endemic. What happened next? In one night, the specimen is just gone, missing. Someone stolen. It is very, very sad for me. And Okay, maybe also Florian will give some response to the question. Please, Dr. Ian. Botanic garden. Is it better to assign an IUCN category of species based on present knowledge and change it later when more data become available?
Hi, yeah, this is a really good question. And my answer is yes. I think it's we need to have a baseline to work from, and just getting species on the red list based on whatever information we had gives us that baseline to then move forward and collect the data, because for a lot of species, a lot of groups aren't even monographed, and doing a red list assessment can be the first time that all of the information about that species is pulled together. So obviously, if you're assigning, you have to be careful how you assess a species. So when you don't have a lot of knowledge, assigning a species as data deficient is not the desirable thing to do, because once a species is labelled as data deficient, it can fall off the radar when it comes to prioritising species for conservation. People won't look at it and think that's a species you want to prioritise. So it can be challenging, but sometimes you don't have a choice. And I think just having species out there, I think one of my old colleagues used to use the term giving plants a voice. And I think that's why it's so important that we just assess as many species as we can, regardless of the information we have, and we can move forward from them. And it helps us to highlight where the research gaps are and what we need to know, so that we can assess them with more accuracy in the future.
Okay. Thanks, Amy. And then also, Hobon Chuan also mentioned the question also a little bit similar to Barbara. Would you recommend assigning IUCN status on species from known data even though incomplete, or rather assess it as data deficient while waiting for more data that may not be available anytime soon?
I would assign, first of all, if we wait to have complete data for the species to be assessed, then we wouldn't be able to assess many species. The majority of species have very little information, and we always try to come to a category. We try to avoid listing something as data deficient, because sometimes you don't, the categories and criteria use parameters that allow you to use the little information that you have. One thing that is very important, though, is to always mention the quality of the data that you are using on the red assessment. And when you know you're using incomplete data, it is also important to mention that more information is necessary. And in some of the examples that Amy gave in her presentation, she exemplified this very well. It's like, with the information we have now, this species is categorized as this, but further research might indicate a different category. Something very important in the red list process is that it indicates the gaps in knowledge, which areas of research you need to focus on for certain plant species, and yeah. You're muted, Bayu.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. No question for Dr. Ian from Arif Hamidi from Fauna and Flora International. Considering so many plant species was assessed under threatened species spreading across the country, yet the strategy to conserve the species has only provided to 14 species. First question, how the strategy deal with other threatened plant species? Second, toward the provided strategy, strategy of conservation plan, how other parties or communities able to involve in the conservation across coordinatively. I believe recently there are more communities or parties who rise and concerned to the threatened plan yet have no idea how to deal with this, Dr. Ia. Baik, terima kasih Pak Bayu. Thank you very much, Kang Arif, for the questions. For the first question, how the strategy to deal with the threatened plant species? As I mentioned in my presentation, it is important to develop the new strategy for the rest of the species, especially narrow endemic species, critically endangered species, and also species with distinct evolutionary process. So I think the strategy is to focus on the most threatened species, as this species is need urgent and immediate conservation action. So we can focus the development of new strategic plan on this kind species. Okay, and then for the second question, yes, it is important to involve to invite other stakeholders that are relevant to the development of the strategic plans, especially those that are directly connected to the population of the species, such as the Ministry of Environmental and Forestry, and also the university and the local governments, and also the private sectors, such as many communities, plant communities that are concerned on the conservation of the threatened plant species in Indonesia. So yes, it is important to involve all the stakeholders and work together to develop the new strategic plan for the threatened Indonesian plants. Thank you, Pak Bayu. I think that's all from me. Okay, thank you. Back to Emmy. This is from Kate Hardwich from Q. Could you publish or make available a list of all the species requiring more research or harvesting so that Indonesian students and researchers can fill this knowledge gap?
Yeah. Hi, Kate. Thanks for your question. Yeah, definitely. It'd be great to make that information available, because that will help us to fill those knowledge gaps. So yeah, definitely we'll be able to make that available, and I'll probably speak to you about that. So, thanks.
Okay, back to Barbara. This is from Nani Kurnia. I think it's maybe a student from University UNM. I'm not sure the abbreviation of this university. Can you expand who are deserved to participate in the training of Red List, and what are their rights and obligation if they're passing the training?
Okay, so anyone can access the training resources to learn how to use the IUCN Red List categories and criteria. There's online resources that you can access on the IUCN Red List webpage. The course is online, and at the end it has an exam. So everybody deserves to participate in the Red List training. And obligations after passing, no, you don't have any obligation. You can use the knowledge that you learn through the course to to assess plant species if you're a botanist. Obviously, the assessments would have to go through the red list process. You know, like you submit the assessment, then that assessment is sent to another expert for them to check that the information and the categories and criteria are applied properly. And before it is published on the IUCN red list, it needs to go through the consistency check in the IUCN red list before it is published. So yeah, anybody can access the training materials.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Now to Dr. Ians. I think as the question is Indonesia, and I will, this is question from Azwar Diar, this is from the junior high school. I think it's better to give question and answer in Indonesia, so maybe he will understand better. Pak Ian, sorry. Barbara, sorry, we just little bit take some change to speak Indonesia. Oke, dari banyak spesies itu, adakah spesies yang khusus dalam penanganannya? Spesies apa seperti yang dimiliki orang Indonesia di rumah pada umumnya? Kemudian ada juga pertanyaan kedua, Pak Ian. Ini terkait dengan apakah Pak Ian tahu status pohon bernuk atau Majapahit yang termasuk terancam punah atau belum? Dan pohon ini apakah asli Indonesia atau bukan? Terima kasih. Monggo Pak Ian.
Baik Pak Bayu, saya jawab pakai bahasa Indonesia ya Pak Bayu.
Silakan pakai bahasa.
Nanti translate sama Pak Bayu ya.
Bilingual.
Baik, ya. Untuk yang pertanyaan pertama, apakah ada jenis-jenis yang membutuhkan penanganan khusus? Banyak, setiap jenis itu membutuhkan penanganan yang berbeda. Seperti contoh Dipterocarpaceae, ini sangat rewel untuk proses koleksinya di hutan, kemudian proses adaptasinya di kebun raya, kemudian proses penanamannya di kebun, seperti itu. Membutuhkan treatment-treatment khusus, seperti penanganan kelembaban, kemudian intensitas cahaya, dan sebagainya. Setiap jenis berbeda penanganannya, membutuhkan penanganan yang spesifik seperti itu. Kemudian apakah ada jenis-jenis yang biasa ditanam di rumah begitu ya Pak Bayu?
Iya.
Untuk yang jenis-jenis langka sepertinya jarang ya, karena memang langka, jadi tidak mudah untuk ditemukan dan tidak mudah untuk dirawat dan dikembangbiakkan secara rumahan seperti itu. Atau mungkin ada informasi yang lain bisa ditambahkan oleh peserta yang lain seperti itu. Pak Bayu, untuk yang kedua, pertanyaan dari peserta kedua ini yang buah Majapahit ya Pak Bayu?
Majapahit.
Baik, sebenarnya sudah saya jawab di kolom chat, tapi saya nggak apa-apa saya utarakan. Untuk yang Crescentia QJT ini status konservasinya list concern, dan ini jenis ini tersebar luas di dunia ya. Jadi tidak hanya di Indonesia seperti itu Pak Bayu.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry, I'll back to the English. Now, there is a question also from Nizar Nasrullah from IPB University. It's question to Barbara and Amy. So you both can answer the same question of this. Question is, it was informed that 31% of species in the red list, and among that 45% threatened species. And our Amy said also 40%. Okay. Could you inform which group of plant has the higher number categorized as threatened species?
Okay, I was trying to look for the question because it's a long one, and I cannot find it. So Let me try and look for it.
So could you inform which group of plant has the higher number of categorized as a threatened species?
The cycads.
Oh, cycads, right.
Yeah, even though it's not a very speciose group, we're talking about 300 species, is the most threatened group of all groups that have ever been assessed for the IUCN Red List, with 64% of species threatened with extinction.
And also, this is the reasons the species to turn into the threatened species. So is there any information about the physical character or ecological character or any reasons why this species is become threatened?
Well, I think one of the main reasons is that plants in general have tend to have smaller distribution ranges than many of the animals. When you compare like the size of the range of plants, at least we did it for cacti, you know, the only group that we could compare it with was amphibians. They tend to have also very small distribution ranges. And what this what happens is that a lot of plant species are outside protected areas because of this. And also there's so many factors affecting them, right? So because they have small distributions, they're more prone to be affected by threats. I don't know if Amy would like to add anything else.
Yeah. Maybe Amy have a different view of this.
No, I think Barbara's hit the nail on the head there. It's those one of the main factors. I mean, there's so much research into, you know, plant functional traits and things that link to extinction risk. And there are lots of different factors. So other things to take into account are things like what's pollinating the species. And for some species that are pollinated by animals, things like mammals, which are also highly, many things like primates are often highly threatened with extinction as well, that can really influence the threat status of a species. So there's lots of different things, so much research, whether a plant is an epiphyte, does it rely on another species in order to survive, things to do with its flowering, its phenology, its seed production, and if you look at things like trees, they're often very
valuable for the people to sell or to trade the agar wood. So this is same thing. Like also, I think this is very interesting. How to protect the agar wood in the field, as well as how to use it wisely and also sustainably. Please, Barbara.
So I think it would be interesting. I gather from what was said that probably the agar wood is gathered from the wild. I don't know if it can be cultivated as well. And I guess in this case, when plants are utilized, we really need to look into ways to use the species sustainably. Right, because it is difficult when livelihoods depend on species like agar wood. So look into sustainable ways of using it, and I don't know, in some cases there might be that there is no ways, you know, and it needs to be regulated. Different kinds of regulations, like spreading the season when the species is harvested, you know. I don't know personally much about agarwood. I know they were assessed through the global tree assessment, and they were very difficult to to assign a category. But
yeah, thank you. The SAMA project last year also conducted by a research center of biology, also assessing the agarwoods in eastern part of Indonesia. Maybe later I will let them to give some suggestions, and the population in the wild, how much they exist, and also how much they will use by people in there.
yeah, and I guess the assessments have a lot of the information about the threats and the conservation needs. So it would be good to make a conservation action plan based on the information and involving the right stakeholders, so that any kind of project to protect this species is successful, including the communities, obviously, that rely on agarwood.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. And now it's just come to from the YouTube live. Mahmudin, this is from Cibodas Botanic Garden, asking maybe to Dr. Ayans about the effort of the botanic gardens in reintroductions of this threatened plant. So how botanic garden in Indonesia already have a plan to reintroduce this threatened plant species? Dr. Jans.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Bayu, for the question. Actually, Bogor Botanic Garden have conducted the reintroduction program in the past. At least 10 species have been introduced to their natural habitats, mostly in the Ujung Kulon National Park, and also species in the Taman Nasional Gunung Halimun Salak National Park. Also for the reintroduction of endemic palm of the what's the name of the species? Javana? The Java palm, the endemic Java palm, Pinanga javana. Yes, the species is reintroduced to the Halimun Salak National Park. So yes, in the past we have conducted this reintroduction program. At least 10 species, if I am not wrong, have been introduced to their natural habitat.
Okay, so yeah. Actually, that's Botanica is also actively conducting the introductions action. Some plant already reintroduced to their natural habitat and seem to be successful. Some, yeah. And okay, next question. This is from Dr. Didi Pribadi, a director of Bali Botanic Garden. He is my successor. So Barbara or Amy, if you have time, pandemic has gone, then maybe you can visit Bali. Then don't forget to visit beautiful, very beautiful Bali Botanic Garden there. And the question for Barbara, this is, I just know that IUCN has an initiative called Nature-Based Solutions. Do you think this will give us the opportunity to conserve our plant diversity, especially in the cities or the urban area?
I think it definitely presents an opportunity to conserve species, and yeah, a lot of examples of nature-based solutions are done in urban areas. And IUCN also has a very strong program on urban biodiversity. urban alliance, and definitely it is a very hot topic. So yeah, nature-based solutions can present an opportunity for conservation of biodiversity in cities.
I think Dr. Didik should contact you personally.
Sure.
Assess
of course.
And then maybe the opportunity Dr. Didik will invite you later. Also, this is for Amy from Tati Suryati Samsudin. Is there any reasons why you focus on trees of Java and Sumatra Islands? Is it because of high human activity, or is there another prospect?
Hi. Yeah, I think I answered this one in the chat, but yeah, the main reason for focusing on it is that they were highly likely to be threatened. So Java and Sumatra endemic plants, and this is just due to a combination of factors. So both islands have seen really high levels of land use change, but also species endemic to islands they're just more likely to be threatened in general because they have naturally restricted range sizes, and therefore when they experience threats, there's nowhere else for them to go. They tend to impact a large number of individuals within the population. So yeah, focusing on endemics to Sumatra and Java seems like a good place to prioritize to start for the space of the project.
Oh yeah. There's come question from he is my college also, Professor Topik Hidayat from Bandung. Come to Barbara. Question is, do you think that phylogenetic diversity can be used as a tool to to determine the extinction of the species? Oh, yes, he is a phylogenetic scientist.
Well, there's an approach that it's used to prioritize phylogenetically unique groups. I forgot the name, but yes. Well, the whole skeleton of conservation is taxonomy and phylogenetics. So it is very important when you're doing conservation. You need to know what you are talking about, what you want to conserve. So to have a strong phylogeny is always very good. And as I mentioned before, it is consider, like it is used, this phylogenetic uniqueness to prioritize conservation in those groups that have lineages, that when those lineages go extinct, the whole lineage goes with it.
Yeah. Yes, maybe because sometimes the phylogenetic trees also produce very strange data on the species, and then like something there, then probably this is mostly interesting in phylogenetic way, also in the also in genetic information on that. Somehow it's also maybe can be used for phylogenetic information to assess the threatened category. Then the question is come, and every time is just running out. Okay, just
I typed some of the answers to some of them, so I hope they were not a lot of them pending.
Thank you, Barbara. The participant, please check your question in the windows of question and answer. Probably you already has answer over there. And for Dr. Ian, there is a question from Isnainar in Palu. Palu is in Sulawesi Island, Celebes. do you have any information about the conservations of the plant in the region of Sulawesi, mainly in central Celebes? Please, Dr. Ian. Baik, terima kasih Pak Bayu. Thank you very much for the questions. Currently in Sulawesi, there are 84 threatened plant species in Sulawesi. From this number, 15 species are critically endangered, 35 species is in danger, and then 34 species are vulnerable. That's the current situation in Sulawesi now concerning the threatened species there in the island.
Okay.
Thank you, Bayu.
Even there is a very limited study in the eastern part of Indonesia, but in some case, Celebes, Sulawesi, it is very unique region that is in the Wallace line. It is different with the eastern part of or the western part. So this is in the baseline and very interesting to study in Celebes. Okay, I think we only have chance to give the last question. This is the last question to Barbara from J.C. Chang. This is for Polar Lines Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. So how can we, in different countries, collaborate to exchange methods and procedures and success and failure study? For example, we in Palestine, it's in Palestine, have a good research report on threatened and endangered species, and we agree there is a need for habitat study around the world. Please. So I will repeat my question. Maybe my English is not good enough. So
just the first part.
Okay.
Please.
How can we, in different countries, collaborate to exchange method and procedure? Also, the success and the failure story.
Okay, and they refer to methods and procedures in red listing, or
yes, methods.
Well, it would be. I'm not sure if they have like their own national system, or if they're following the IUCN red list categories and criteria at a regional level. Obviously, if they're using the IUCN methodology, it would be easier to see what they're doing. And there's many different regional examples of assessments that have been conducted, for example, in the Mediterranean region, in the Mesoamerican region, and that could be comparable to what they're doing. Something important is that to remember that the species that are included in the IUCN red list are global assessments. So if a species is endemic to a country or a region, then that would be the global assessment. But if the species is distributed outside the country and it's been assessed at the country level only, you have to use the guidelines for regional assessments. And in terms of sharing, there's many ways in which that can be done. I think the easiest thing would be for the person to reach out to me and explain a little bit more of what they've been doing.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. I think time is over for our discussion now. Before I close the sessions, I'll just make some remark of statement
I think it cannot be avoided that the red list will become more longer. A new species will be added to the list, probably maybe exponentially, when a new study or new project is conducted. We consider also the GSPS target 8, where at least 75% of the threatened plant species is in insect ex situ collection, and at least 20% of them available for recovery and restorations. So I think this the main roles of botanic gardens in Indonesia, mainly in Indonesia, and that's all around the world, that we have to consider that all the lists in IUCNs, 70% should be conserved in botanic gardens. And then this is a very challenging target. Okay. Last, I ask you all to campaign, let's make red list shorter. Last but not least, I would like to thank to this respected speakers, participants, and I hope all we talk today will bring you a perspective how we can study, save, and use plant wisely and sustainably. Now, it is time to hand over back to Dr. Yayan. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bayu Aji. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we move to the next agenda. The awards and book presentations as tokens of our appreciations to the distinguished speakers. The book is entitled 3,500 Plant Species of Bogor Botanic Gardens of Indonesia. The book was written by research staff from 4 botanic gardens of Indonesian Institute of Sciences from Bogor, Cibodas, Purwodadi, and Bali. It contains the descriptions of 3,500 plant species. All our living collections are these 4 botanic gardens. I would like to invite the head of Research Center for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens, Dr. R. Hendrian, Master of Science, to award their certificates and the book to Dr. Barbara Getz, Ms. Amy Barker, and Dr. Ian Robiansa.
Thank you very much, Pak Yayan. It is my pleasure to listen to very interesting presentation delivered by Dr. Barbara Getz. And personally, I feel very, very happy to hear the recent information shared by her. The certificate is awarded for you, Dr. Barbara. Thank you very much for your participation in this webinar.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. And then also, I would like to extend my gratitude to Amy Barker. Thank you very much, Amy, for your participation. And please pass my warmest regards to colleagues and friends in Royal Botanic Gardens Kew. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure as well, and I will pass that on. Thanks very much.
And last but not least, terima kasih banyak Dr. Ian Robiansa, one of our young researcher, tetapi kualitasnya sangat baik. Mudah-mudahan ke depan Pak Ian bisa meningkatkan kualitas riset untuk konservasi di Indonesia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Hatur nuhun, Pak Ian. And also, as mentioned by Pak Yayan, I would like to give this book to 3 of you. Hope it will arrive in your place soon. Yeah. For Dr. Barbara Geurts, Abi Barker, and Dr. Ian Robiansa. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henryan, Master of Science. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we move to the final agenda of today's webinar. The closing remarks from the Head of Research Center for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Bapak Dr. R. Henryan, Master of Science. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bapak Dr. R. Henryan, Master of Science.
Honorable speakers and respected participants, firstly, on behalf of Research Center for Plant Conservation and Botanic Garden, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, I would like to extend my deep gratefulness to the Chairman of National Agency for Research and Innovation, Bapak Dr. Laksana Trihandoko, for delivering his welcoming remarks on the opening of the webinar yesterday. Also, my deep gratitude and appreciation go to all the speakers from Botanic Garden Conservation International, Dr. Paul Smith, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, Dr. Barbara Geurts, to speaker from Singapore Botanic Gardens, Singapore, speaker from Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, United Kingdom, from Bali Botanic Gardens, and from Research Center for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens. Ladies and gentlemen, all the participants, we are coming to the end of this two-day webinar. It is really our pleasure to have your participation and active contribution. Here, I will not make any resume or conclusion, but I would say that it is great to see that we have had interesting and fruitful discussion during the days. I note that resilience, adaptivity, and agility are the key words that should be noted by all the managers of botanic gardens in encountering the situation we face nowadays. Meanwhile, global collaboration is also another important keyword in halting dramatic trends of plant species extinction. Thank you very much to all of you. Be safe and stay healthy. Warmest regard from Bogor Botanic Garden. See you in other occasion. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. R. Henryan, Master of Science. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are now coming to the point of closing the webinar. Before that, I would like to thank you to all our prominent speakers for their wonderful and insightful presentations, to the moderator for leading and encouraging the discussions, and thank you too to each one of you, our participants, for your great participations and engagements in today's webinar. We would like to apologize for any inconvenience during today's webinar. We do hope that you enjoy our webinar. Please stay safe and keep healthy. We can beat this pandemic together. Happy 204th anniversary Bogor Botanic Gardens. Selamat ulang tahun ke-204 Kebun Raya Bogor. Terus berkarya menjaga kelestarian flora Indonesia. Thank you again. Goodbye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bye all.
Bye all.
See you
again.
again.
Thank you, Barbara.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara.
Amy.
Thank you, Pak Bayu.